Unit 1, Day 6 is a review of solving quadratic equations. You probably learned these at maybe for a start in 8th grade and then continue them on in 9th grade. So this is a pretty involved equation solving, and if you don't know the steps to this, it's going to end up hindering your ability to do some geometry this year. So first of all, quadratic equations are going to be equations where the highest exponent is squared. Whenever you see a squared in an equation, that means you can't solve it the same way you've been solving other equations. So the steps are, you want to get the equation equal to 0, and it has to be in descending order, largest exponent first. That's also called standard form. And you've probably heard that terminology from last year. So you want to get your equation in standard form. You're going to factor completely. Might be more than one kind of factoring. You're going to set each factor with a variable equal to 0, and then you're going to solve each. So when I look at question number 1 and I see those y squareds in there, that tells me that I want to get this equation equal to 0 so that I can factor. So I'll have 3y squared minus 13 equals 14. I'm going to minus the 14 from both sides. So I have 3y squared minus 27 equals 0. GCF factoring means I'm going to take out a 3, y squared minus 9 equals 0. What's inside my parentheses can be factored. It's dots, y plus 3, y minus 3. In this case, you want to go back and evaluate your factors. Factors are determined by where the multiplication is. So I've got a multiplication here and a multiplication here. So I have 1, 2, 3 factors. When I make my t-chart and set my factors equal to 0, there's really 3 sets of factors, but can 3 ever equal 0 for the first factor? No, so that's nonsense. So we wouldn't really put that in there. You can leave that off because all it does is create something that doesn't make sense. And then I have y plus 3 equals 0. And I'm going to solve that. So minus 3, minus 3, y equals negative 3. And then I'm going to have y minus 3 equals 0. So I'm going to do plus 3 and plus 3. So y equals positive 3. So please notice that there are 2 answers to this question. One of my answers is y equals negative 3. One of my answers is y equals positive 3. In a question like number 2, it may not initially look like it's going to be one of those questions with an x squared in it. However, as soon as you start solving and you distribute, that x squared becomes extremely visible. My first step is to get this equal to 0, so I want to minus the 35 from both sides. Factor, so that's why we did the factoring already in this unit. Right now I have 2 factors, both of which can get set equal to 0 because they have a variable in them. Add 7 to both sides. X plus 5 equals 0. Subtract 5 from both sides. X equals negative 5. So I have 2 answers for this one as well. One of them 7 and one of them is negative 5. If you were asked to check this question, you would have to do 2 checks. You'd have to do one check where both of your x's get filled in with a 7. And then you'd have to do another check where both of your x's get filled in with a negative 5. So that would be a 2-check problem. On the next page, quadratic equation again. I want to add x squared to both sides. 2x cubed, x cubed. So when I see that cube there, it's really initially more than a quadratic equation. It's actually considered a cubic equation, but we're going to treat these the same way. So I'm going to minus 6x from both sides. So I have 2x cubed plus x squared minus 6x equals 0, and I'm going to factor. When I factor, I'm taking an x out of every term, and you can see that what you're left with inside of the parentheses is something that you would have to do factoring on. It's trinomial factoring. It's the split the middle one. So I'm just going to keep on going here right into the space for question 5, and I'll come back and erase it later. When I do the split the middle, I'm going to take this 2 and multiply by negative 6, and that's going to give me negative 12. I want factors of 12 that somehow will create the 1 that's in here, so it's going to be 4 and 3. If it has to be a negative 12, my signs are going to be opposite of each other, one positive, one negative. A plus sign that's right here tells me that the bigger number is positive, the smaller number is negative. So when I go through to split this middle, I'm going to have 2x squared plus 4x minus 3x minus 6 equals 0. X, I'm going to factor this first part, 2x, I'm taking out x plus 2, minus 3x plus 2. And then I say, what do these terms have in common? That's this one, and they both have an x plus 2. What's left over when I take that x plus 2 out of both of them is a 2x minus 3. And at this point, both of those factors get set equal to 0. In this case, I have 1, 2, 3 factors, and all 3 need to get set equal to 0 because they all have a variable in them. At this point, I'm going to ask you to pause the video, please, and do questions 6 and 7. So question 6 and question 7. Please check your answers on number 6 and 7. Make sure you got the right answer. Question 6 has 2 answers, 0 and 4. Question 7 has 3 answers, 0, 4, and 5. I went back and erased my work off question number 5. I'd like to do that one with you, and then question 8. The reason why I wanted to do question 5 with you is because I wanted to remind you that when you're doing these questions, you want to make sure that wherever your x squared is, it's positive. So because the positive x squared is already on the right-hand side, I'm going to keep that there, and I'm going to bring everything from the other side over. So I'm going to minus 8x, and I'm going to add 4. So I'm technically getting the left-hand side now equal to 0. It doesn't matter. So this is 3x squared minus 8x plus 4. This is a split the middle problem because we end up having a leading coefficient of 3, which is not factorable. So when I go through and do this, then I'm going to take the 3 and multiply by the 4 and get 12 as the numbers have to multiply to. And somehow from 12, I want factors of 12 that give me an 8. So that's 6 and 2. This plus sign tells me that these two signs on the 6 and 2 have to be the same. This tells me what they both are. So when I split the middle on this question, it's going to be 3x squared minus 6x minus 2x plus 4. I'm going to factor these two, GCF, and then these two, GCF. So when I do that, I can take a 3x out of the first two terms and a negative 2 out of the second two terms. Remember, if I take a negative 2 out of positive 4, it gives me a negative 2. And then I'm going to say, what do these two terms have in common? And you're going to say that those two terms have an x minus 2 in common. If I take that out of both of them, I have a 3x minus 2. So I get 0, make the little t-chart, 0 equals 3x minus 2, and 0 equals x minus 2. So when I finish this question, on this side I'm going to add 2 to both sides. So I get x equals 2. On this side I'm going to add 2. And then I'm going to divide by 3, so I'm going to get 2/3 for my other answer. So in the middle of this problem, right in here, we had to do split the middle. Sometimes that happens that we have to do that. Now question 8's on here because of those denominators. The fact that we have fractions in there tends to mess people up a little bit. We're going to use the same process on this one that we did on one yesterday or the day before. If we have an equation and part of it has a denominator and we don't want the denominator there, we can find the least common denominator, which in this case is 3, and multiply both sides of our equation by that 3. So over here, when I multiply both sides by 3, it's 3 times a third. The 3's cancel and just give me 1x squared. It's 3 times 4/3. The 3's cancel, which just gives me 4x. And on this side, I have a -3. And as soon as I do that, where I multiply through by the least common denominator, you can see that this already looks like a much easier problem. So I have x squared plus 4x plus 3 equals 0. I wanted to add 3 to both sides to get it equal to 0. I'm going to factor, so x plus 3 and x plus 1. And then I'm going to make that t-chart. So I'm going to have x plus 3 equals 0, x is -3, and over here x plus 1 equals 0, x is -1. So 2 answers on this question. So as we said, this is still algebra review. You notice that all the titles say it's a review of things you should know from before. So we like to review this just to make sure you're ready for all of the geometry that's going to involve this.